والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. سبحانك لا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم. وقل رب زدني علما. قال الإمام النووي رحمه الله تبارك وتعالى: وعن خولة بنت عامر الأنصارية رضي الله عنها وهي امرأة حمزة رضي الله عنه قالت: سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول: إن رجال يتخوضون في مال الله بغير حق فلهم النار يوم القيامة. رواه البخاري. So again, repeating this hadith that we mentioned last night for two reasons. Number one is that we weren't online, so some of the people who generally tune in were not able to listen to that. Number two, there's also some further points that I wanted to illustrate regarding this hadith. So Khawla bint Amir al-Ansari radiallahu anha, who was the wife of Sayyidina Hamza, Sayyid al-Shuhada radiallahu anha, she says that she heard Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that there are men meaning people, could be men, could be women, who misappropriate public funds. In other words, they are, they have access to public funds or funds which are under their custody or under their authority, and they are misappropriating, they're acquiring unjustly or utilizing them, illegally. And as a result of that, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, so for them is the fire on the day of Qiyamah. So obviously what is being referred to directly here are the people who are given custody of the public funds, particularly in those days, Bayt al-Mal, the zakat funds, the kharaj and other, as we say, mawarid or revenues which used to come into the public treasury, which is actually under the ownership of the entire ummah. Everyone of the ummah has a part of those resources. And so the public treasury actually is owned by everyone. It doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to the entire body of the Muslims. However, the same concept holds true in other contexts and other constructs that perhaps we are not aware of, or even if we're aware of, we're not particular about. For example, in the construct of the family. For example, the husband's resources and his money, which he might have there in the house, or he might hand over to his wife, for expenses, etc. So those funds belong to the husband. They don't belong to the wife. They belong to the husband. So the wife, in utilizing those funds, needs to have the permission of the husband. Now that could be explicit in each transaction, or there could be a mutual understanding that, okay, whatever you feel is necessary, go ahead and spend. That's fine, if there's an understanding that's comprehensive in that way. Otherwise, it's required for permission. In anything that belongs to somebody else, we do not have permission to utilize that thing without their explicit permission. And as I mentioned, in the case that there is a general understanding, and it's a very clear understanding, not I think it's going to be okay. No, I think you have to be careful of I think. That can be very dangerous. Similarly, sometimes the children feel that, my father's money or my mother's money or that's ours. It's the same house. No, it's not. As a matter of fact, it's the other way around. Nabi says, Anta wa maluka li abik. He mentioned to one of the young Sahabis who had a dispute with his father. He said, you and your wealth belong to your father. And we're sort of losing that etiquette. We're losing that understanding of the hierarchy, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has designated. So, in short, anyone, the utilization of any resources which are not explicitly and, definitely your own property, we don't have authority and we don't have permission to utilize them without the permission of their rightful owner. If it's a public property, then according to the rules and regulations therein, and if it's a household or if it's between husband and wife, and similarly, the wife's money. Husband says, I'm the husband, no, it's her money. And this is something which is peculiar to Islam from 1400 years ago. for example, here in the West, it's Mrs. So-and-so, and she takes on the name of the husband. Do we know where that comes from? That comes from the fact that the woman was actually considered to be, under the ownership of the husband. Years ago, back in the 1970s, I was in an office, probably it was a Social Security office, something like that, and I had to fill out a form for myself and my wife. So I mentioned my name and my wife's name, my name wasn't connected to that. So the lady who was concerned, she said, well, who is this? I said, that's my wife. But she doesn't have your name. I said, yes, she's not my property. We have a mutual understanding. We have a contractual agreement. But everyone has their own ownership, and she was really taken aback. So we don't know where some of those things come from. So this is very critical. So every human being who has property, whether it's man, woman, wife, husband, children, parents, it's their property, and no one can use that without explicit permission. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to look after these rights. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.